Hi there, Kimberly Flanagan of Kimberly's Quilts. One of the things as a Handi Quilter National Educator, I'm retired now from traveling and teaching. However, I still get questions on social media from my current and past students about drag and drop. It's probably one of the most frustrating functions within the Pro Stitcher application that my students encounter. And I've often taught in my classes what I consider an alternate way of advancing your quilts that to me is much less frustrating, more accurate, and just easier to do once you get the hang of it. It's the way I've been advancing my quilts for many, many years. So I've been asked to jump on here and explain that process and share it with you so that you guys can try it if you find drag and drop frustrating and you're struggling with it. Just a suggestion. Everybody has their own ways of doing things that they like, and I'm all about if something works for you, then continue doing it and embrace it. If not, and this does help you out, then great. I'm all about improving your experience. So I do not use drag and drop. Part of it is creature of habit, the way I was taught many, many years ago when I first got my Pro Stitcher. And some of it is just same frustrations that you guys experience when you try and use it and the quilt doesn't advance or the design doesn't advance, or you forgot to hit drag or you forgot to hit drop. And do I do it needle down? Do I do it needle up? I don't do it at all. I use a combination of the reposition function and moving my start and end point to accommodate the exact same thing, but it's less frustrating for me. So I'm going to first describe to you what I do, and then I'm going to jump on Pro Stitcher here and show you in the Pro Stitcher module exactly how I do it. So when we set up our edge-to-edge design, we should be, if I have a video out there on how to create a balanced quilt and a balanced design, we should be making our design a couple inches, depending on your comfort level, 2 to 4 inches larger all the way around the height and width. So if I have a quilt that's 60 by 80, I will set the area up of, say, 62 to 64 by 82 to 84, whatever your comfort level is and that amount of forgiveness. So I usually do 3 inches. So if I have a 60 by 80 quilt, I'll set my area up 63 by 83. My personal comfort level, you have to determine what yours is. But we never set the quilt up so that it is exactly 60 by 80. That gives us no forgiveness. That gives us for nothing if we end up getting to the bottom of the quilt and maybe it's a little bit longer. Maybe we didn't measure correctly. I'm always saying set ourselves up for success. So 63 by 83 is what I do. In my sample here, you'll see that my area is 63 by 83 as well. We start stitching in the batting on the left side of the quilt. So the process that I use, this is completely acceptable because we're in the batting. I would never suggest you try this if your first stitch is on your fabric, because then you have issues with the what we're going to do here. So if I have my quilt set up 63 by 83 and I start to stitch, I usually will take a marker, something like this. And after it has taken the first stitch and it starts along its stitching path, I then will take this marker and I will put a dot exactly where that first stitch was. And that's in the batting. So it's okay that I put a mark there. I'm going to trim that off. Then I will put the number 1 for the first row. I will let it stitch across through there. And when it comes back and it starts the second row, after the machine has moved away, I take a marker and I put a dot and I put a number 2. And I do this incrementally as I'm advancing down the quilt. Every new row that starts, I put a dot and I put the number of that corresponds with the start point for that row. Why do I do that? First of all, I do not ever trim my thread tails. It's in my batting. I'm going to cut that off when I trim down my quilt anyway. I don't always bind my quilts right away. So what if no reason for me to have to trim everything up right away. I trim them down right before I put the binding on. So if I have that long thread tail, I can forever locate exactly where that first stitch is in case I didn't put a dot there, in case I didn't number it. But I can locate it. But why do I do this? There's actually a method to my madness that until I explain it, most people don't really go, why is she doing that? So I have told the story multiple times about my very first quilt, and I did not know Pro Stitcher that well. My dealer had not given me much training when they installed it. And I was just really struggling with how to do this. I wasn't proficient in resizing. I wasn't proficient in being able to judge how long it was going to take to quilt something. My first quilt was a queen size quilt, and the design that I had chosen was 2 inches tall. I started at midday on a Saturday, and I was up until after 2 a.m. finishing that quilt because I was scared to death to shut down and go to bed because I did not know how to restart things. I came up with this process, as many things in our sewing, through necessity is the mother of all inventions. I needed to make sure that I wasn't up until 2 a.m. ever again because I didn't know where I was on my quilt to be able to shut down and restart. So by putting that dot there and that number, if I have a power failure, if I decide I'm just tired and I want to stop this quilt and I want to start it again in the morning, or I need to go run an errand, I can do that. And I know exactly what row I'm on based on that number that I've put in the batting that aligns with that start point dot. So now I have no problem shutting down and restarting ever, okay? I always make sure that before I start stitching, after I've done the resizing, after I've done the cropping, after I've done the, filling up the design and getting my entire layout, I always save that. So if I ever need to shut down and come back, I have exactly what I have set up and what I'm stitching from right there. I don't have to recreate anything. I don't have to do anything to regenerate that layout. I have a totally different video on how to save designs and how to do file management within your Pro Stitcher. I suggest you check out that video for that. So let me jump on Pro Stitcher here. I'm going to share my screen so that you can follow along with me on exactly what I do to advance my quilt. You will see here on my screen a quilt top that I have set up. If we go over here in the area tab, you will see right here that it is a 63 by 83. I've already gone through repeating it and resizing it and getting everything set up. I have come in here, I have baselined it and I've closed the edge, or I've cropped it and closed the edges. Now all I have to do is come in here at this point and I hit baseline. I also come in here and I will save everything that's on here. And I have a folder out here called WIP. That's my own personal, it stands for work in progress. This is where I save any of my work that I'm working on. So I'm going to rename this and say sample. And I'm going to save it. Now, if I have a need to shut down, I have power outage, when I come back in here, if I go to my folder that is WIP, you will see that I have sample right here, and it will bring in exactly the same design, same layout and everything as what I'm about to start stitching. So if I come in here and I look at my layout, this area right here starts, and it's right here at this area. We'll start at that top corner outside of my quilt top in the batting. It's about 1.5 inches above and about 1.5 inches outside of my quilt top. So if I come into Pro Stitcher and I say run, it's going to start to stitch out this first row. I have an entire quilt out there on a balanced design and what it means to have a balanced design. But this is that top partial row. And if you don't know what that means, I suggest you go back and look at that video. And you will see that it will stitch out that partial row all the way across through there. We're going to let this stitch out real quick, and then I will show you how I proceed from here. While this is stitching, this is the time that I would take my Sharpie marker, and right here where this start point is, where that thread took the first stitch, is where I will put that dot. And right here in the batting is where I would put the number 1. This is my first start point in this design. Now, as we approach the end of the row, you should see in here that we have an end point here, and then we have our jump stitch to go to our second start point. Depending on your machine will depend on what your throat space is and how many of these repeats you can get into a row. So my machine head is paused here. I have an infinity, so I can probably get 2 or 3 rows in before I have to advance. So at this point, I would move my machine head over to this area towards here. I will resume, and you will see that it will come over here and it will start stitching my second row. I haven't had to advance anything, so I'm pretty confident that this row is going to stitch out correctly because I'm still within that first, what I'm going to say advance of the quilt. I haven't had to move it yet, so I'm confident this is going to go well. I am now, as the machine head moves away from this second start point right here, I will take my marker and I will put a dot right where that second start point was. And right here in the batting, I would put the number 2 because this is my second start point from this layout. We're going to let this row finish stitching out, and then we will talk about advancing the quilt and what I do. Okay, so I have finished my first 2 rows. If I do not have enough space to safely stitch out this third row, this is where the magic happens. What I do is the first thing I do is I come in here and I hit cancel. Then I come into Pro Stitcher, the Pro Stitcher tab, and I say new start end point, and I jump this start point down to the one that just stitched. If I had been able to safely stitch out 3 rows, I would have jumped down to the last row that safely stitched. At this point, I usually come in and clear my area. I don't care about my area. It doesn't matter anymore. Once I've got everything set up, it's irrelevant. So this is the start point to the row that just stitched. So at this point, I'll drop my bungee cords, I'll advance my quilt up, but I make sure that this little dot with the number 2 is still exposed where I advanced my quilt. So let's just, for the sake of demonstration here, let's just assume that now where I need my crosshairs to be, it is where, say this is now where the second row, where that blue dot is actually on my fabric. I need to move this start point to that point because that is where my stitching of that row happened. So I can easily come in here and say modify, reposition start point. And when I click this button, I want you to watch how this start point jumps to where that dot and the number 2 is on my fabric. Now I know that this is perfectly aligned with my second row, and I can come in here and simply say Pro Stitcher, New Start End, jump to my next one, turn off New Start, and now I can just come in here, hit Quilt, and run, and it is now going to proceed and pick up perfectly where my new row should be. So that quick and easily, I have advanced my quilt. I have aligned that start point. I don't have, even if I forget to the order in which to do the buttons and everything, I know which start point it was. And I know where it is on my fabric because I put that blue dot in the number 2. Had I gotten 3 rows in here, I would do 3. And I would move this start point to where that was. So I'm going to let it stitch out 3 rows here real quick, and then I will show you how I do it again, just so that you can see it doesn't matter whether it's 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows, the concept is still the same. Okay, so I have the next 3 rows stitched out. As this stitched, as soon as this row started and got safely away from my machine head, I would have put a dot there and the number 3. When it started the 4th row, I would have repeated that and put a dot here and the number 4, and then a dot here and the number 5. Why do I put that dot there? I use the laser on my machine head to line up exactly over that dot, put my needle down, and that way my machine head will not move as I reposition my start point. So that's just the reason I put the dot. If you don't need the dot, you can still see your thread tails or whatever. You don't do what works for you. So now that I'm on my 5th row and I need to advance my quilt again, what I will do before I do anything is I come in here and I cancel. And I come into Pro Stitcher and I say New Start End, and I jump down to that 5th row. This is the 5th row, the last one stitched. I will turn my New Start End off. I will advance my quilt. And if my machine head is now, if that 5th row is now lined up, say here, and that's where the blue dot for the start of the 5th row is, this is my machine head, I will now come in and just like before, I will say modify, reposition start point, and this time you will see that start point jump to exactly where my start point was for that stitched row. Now, if I scroll up so you can see, I simply come in here and say Pro Stitcher, New Start End, and jump to the next one. And then when I hit quilt and run, you will see that it will start stitching from the 6th row. And I continue this way all the way down my quilt. If I'm tired and I want to go to bed and I don't want to stay up until 2 a.m. quilting, I could shut down my machine right now. And I know that when I wake up in the morning, that when I pull in this design, because I saved it, all I have to do is come in here and say, open that design, use the new start endpoint to jump to the 5th row, the 6th row, whatever row I'm on, the last stitched row, line up that machine head there. And because I've used the new start endpoint feature within Pro Stitcher and then the modify reposition, I can quickly and easily line up my quilt with no issues. I've been doing this for probably 10 years on my quilts, and it seems to work and be more accurate for me. And I don't have, if I forget to advance my start point, I can do that after I've advanced my quilt. I just have to know what the number is, and I know that because I put it in the batting. I hope this has helped you guys. And if you struggle with drag and drop, that this might be an alternate method for you. I do want to address a question that is often asked in my classes about, well, what if my design is really big and I can't actually see this start point when I advanced? That's really simple. I'm going to zoom in here so that you guys can see what I do in that case. And I'm going to zoom in even closer. Let's assume, for the sake of answering that question, that this is the last stitched row. And this design is so large that I can't really get to that start point and safely line up this row. I just use the new start endpoint feature. And what I will do is I will come in here and I will align my machine head with an area on my quilt that is actually stitched out. This row will have already been stitched. So I can come in here and I can align my machine head exactly over a very low point in this row. And I can come in here and say new start end and use the auto. And now my start point is there. So if I'm going to scroll out so you can see what will happen. If I am going to come over here and say that point on my quilt has been advanced, and now that machine head to that point is, say, here. When I come in and I say modify reposition start point, it's going to move that point on my quilt to that point on the stitched row. So I can still use this feature if I've had a thread break, if I need to somehow not use this blue dot to align. I can use this technique of using the new start endpoint and repositioning to that start point to line up no matter what my issue is. So this process of identifying where a point is that you want to line up doesn't have to just apply to the beginning of a row. It can be to any place. So I hope that that has helped you come up with an alternative to advancing your quilt, but also shown you how to address that if in the case that your design is so large that you still will not see that green dot if you are going to advance a large design.